Welcome to the Industrial Control System Information Sharing and Analysis Center's monthly public briefing. My name is Debbie Wendell, and I will be moderating today's session. I serve as Community Director for the Center and oversee the Center's human-to-human information dissemination mechanisms. Today's briefing, SARA, Understanding and Implementing Shared Situational Awareness, features a panel of distinguished subject matter experts, including Dr. Fred Cohen, founder of Fearless Security, and Graham Speake, Principal Systems Architect at Yokogawa. ICS-ISAC Chair Chris Blask will be facilitating today's discussion. During today's presentation, Chris will take the first few minutes to lay out some background information to frame the issue. Then, each panelist will be introduced and have the opportunity to present their opening remarks. Next, the panel will spend about 35 to 40 minutes for their discussion. And finally, there will be time for questions and answers and open discussion at the end of the presentation. At any point during the call, if you'd like to ask a question, you may use the hand raise feature or type your question into the chat box in the GoToWebinar application. When speaking, if you would please introduce yourself and indicate your industry affiliation. After the meeting, a recording of this session will be available on the Center's website. So now, without any further delay, Chris, over to you for your background presentation.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Thanks for all the people who are here today and all of you watching out there in the future. Hello from the past. I'm going to start. I see some familiar faces here today, and as well as some folks that haven't been here before. So I'm going to start with a quick background of who we are and the ICS-ISAC, if my screen will cooperate. So the ICS-ISAC has a mission to promote information sharing in cybersecurity, both human-to-human and machine-to-machine. So what we'll be talking about today is a fair bit of the machine-to-machine in the SARA project. We'll get to that in a minute. We connect entities and communities, cross-sector, international. Our membership consists of a number of organizations like those represented here today with Yokogawa, who is a global manufacturer of industrial control system equipment, Fearless Security, which is a provider of expertise in this space, and other integrators, asset owners, industry organizations, government organizations, so forth. So when we look at our need to have shared situational awareness, what we need to understand is that each of us in our own way have a duty to share. And this isn't as scary as it sounds. We'll get to that a little bit more in a minute. But we live in a very interdependent culture where all of the systems that we depend on each other. So none of us are an island. No facility, no infrastructure, no organization. None of us as individuals live in a fully independent existence. We have to have water to have power. We have to have power to have oil. We have to have transportation to have any of these communication. These images here are from a study by Argonne National Labs that looked at the kind of cascading failures we get when some of us among our community of organizations and facilities suffer failures. And we've seen instances happening in the past, not at this point due to cyber failures, but through other failures, physical failures, the satellite failure in the 1990s and so forth. So we know the risks we face. So somehow we have to find a way to address this. And we're making the point in my slide here, as well as in the conversation that follows, that while hardening systems is a good idea, while looking for vulnerabilities is a good idea, there isn't anything that will lead us to a path where we have stability, the kind of stability we've been used to in the pre-cyber risk era, in the infrastructures that we all count on to go about our daily life. So we're all embedded in this process, the last decade or more, of creating shared situational awareness. And this is founded on the idea that as facilities, the asset owners out there providing the power and the water and the transportation and manufacturing and everything else, they have to be aware of themselves. If they aren't, there isn't anything the rest of us can do to keep them secure. When they are, they're able to use information and knowledge that is shared with them. And they are, in some cases, able to share some knowledge of their own information with the rest of us, which is where it gets a little less scary. But there are already relationships with service providers, such as the manufacturers and like Yokogawa and the information sources and the intelligence sources like Fearless Security and others among our membership and elsewhere, where there's close relationships and there's data and information being shared already. In recent weeks, we've been having conversations around the publicly accessible control system or PAC issue. And this shows one of those artifacts where perhaps the relationships that already exist between asset owners and their vendors and their integrators and their service providers give us avenues to solve some of the more nagging problems out there. And there are public centers and private centers today already in existence. Well, we're one of them. We'll talk about those as we go forward as well, where information pools and can be shared. So we can get to the point where shared situational awareness allows us to address this critical necessity, to have a capability where in real time, as information becomes available from some source of knowledge, whatever it is, whether it's a researcher, whether it's a vendor, whether it's an asset owner themselves, where that knowledge can find its way to a node in a knowledge sharing network, such as the ICSI stack, and from there find itself propagating to other nodes who perhaps themselves are the bridge down to the asset owners themselves. And where those asset owners can then use that knowledge for their protection, know that there's something bad going on in the world, and they can do something about it. Then, the other half of information sharing, where some of those asset owners are able to share some of that knowledge, perhaps not all of them, perhaps not even many of them, perhaps not a great deal of information about who exactly they are, but some of it. That I'm a manufacturing facility in the western half of the United States, and I experienced it. That knowledge can then be shared back through the nodes of the knowledge network so that other asset owners and others can take advantage of that knowledge and build on it forward. So as the ICSI stack, we do various things to propagate this vision, this growing shared situational awareness capability. One of those things is SARA, the Situational Awareness Reference Architecture Project, where we're looking to create a reference architecture where asset owners and their partners and vendors and integrators and everyone else can have some ability to share some of this information in the timely enough fashion, in an automated machine-to-machine fashion, that we can achieve our shared goals. In this project, we're creating various artifacts. There's the SARA guide itself, which is a document that's being in draft now and being published. It gives all the players involved an actual guide to situational awareness. What is it? What are we talking about? How do you do that? With open source solutions, the SARA server itself is a Linux distribution with open source information sharing visibility tools on it that's in the lab being developed now. Within a pilot stage right now, a network of community of sharing, so that we can work through use cases where a knowledge share center is sharing with another knowledge center, which is perhaps then sharing with an asset owner, where an integrator or an intelligence source is sharing with another. So, my slides are advancing a little bit on me. And commercial solutions. We're working with members like Yokogawa, like Palo Alto Networks, and various others to allow them to demonstrate where their commercial solutions provide value in the shared situational awareness environment. So when we talk about awareness in the SARA context, we look at it in these four aspects. But every organization needs to know who they are. They need to know their identity. This is something Dr. Cohen can speak to at great length and great depth. They need to know their inventory, the devices they actually have. They need to know what their activity, what do those devices normally do? Can I tell when those change? And can I tell that I didn't change? And finally, they need to know how to share. How can they consume information effectively? Artifacts of knowledge like ICS's vulnerability advisories that we're all used to seeing, and actually know that they have that device in their inventory. They're actually able to tell if that device is doing interesting and new things that they didn't do. And again, the other half of sharing, can they sometimes share this information with others? So in this process, we put together a pilot that's underway right now. We're working with members like Fearless Security, like Yokogawa, like some of those on the screen here, Palo Alto, Tripwire, and others. We're working through use cases where knowledge like a smart signature and intrusion detection signature from Emerging Threats Pro as an example, can flow in an automated fashion over a message bus, in this case using the stick schema to represent the information, find its way down to an asset owner, in this case the Internet Smart Grid Lab that we're using as a mock asset owner where we can run different use cases, into the SARA server and down to, for example, a Palo Alto system, or into something like Sophia that Graham can talk about. Yokogawa working with Next Defense on Sophia, and provide immediate value to an asset owner. So the good news is that we all of us, not just the IPS-IPAC, not just our membership, but all of us are embedded in the long process to develop these real-time sharing systems. We see this every day as the IPS-IPAC in every direction, whether it's through initiatives like the SIX schema that's been developed under the leadership of MITRE, the information sharing environment inside the U.S. government, the national intelligence, the NIEM, the National Intelligence Exchange Model, that's been functioning for a long time inside the federal government as a means for sharing critical information among government constituents at the federal, state, and local level, and throughout the industry. So instead of believing that we're at a spot, as many of us do right now, where the last 10 years we haven't made a lot of progress because perhaps we haven't made every vendor and every manufacturer into the position where they're making perfectly secure devices. It's important to understand that we made a great deal of progress, that we're right now perhaps in the middle of a very interesting period. For the last 1, 2, 3 years, in the next 1, 2, 3 years, we'll see more and more examples of the capabilities of sharing situational awareness in real time and giving us as individual organizations, as communities, municipalities, states, regions, indeed as a national entity and on the international stage, the ability to get ahead of attackers to a point that we can see what's going on and we can take the actions we need to defend ourselves. So with that, Debbie, if you'll introduce Fred for his initial comments, I will go on mute and we will take the next step of this conversation from there.
With over 40 years of experience, Dr. Fred Cohen is widely considered one of the world's leading authorities in information protection, with a body of work encompassing the breadth and depth of the information security field. Recognized as the person who defined the term computer virus, he has helped create many of the most widely used computer virus defense techniques. In addition, he was the principal analyst who defined the Burton Group Security and Risk Management Strategies Reference Architecture. From this early work, he developed the Fearless Security Standard of Practice for establishing organizational identity, as well as the Initial Assessment System, the open source foundation of assessment that is the basis for the identity portion of SARA. Fearless Security provides support for organizations, integrators, and asset owners looking to use the standard of practice to improve their security decision-making process. Chris, back to you.
And Fred, while you're doing your introduction, I will correct this slide. So playing the part of Daniel Miller will be Graham Speake. Fred, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In fact, Chris, if you could pull up a web browser, it might be easier to teach people how to fish than to hand them fish. While he's doing that, I wanted to talk briefly about the standard of practice and how it came to be and what we're trying to accomplish with it. For many years, people have, let me just, yep, the Fred Cohen Associates side of good. For many years, people have been trying to do assessments. Many of the large CPA firms and folks like Gardner and so forth do these $250,000 large-scale, long-term, as-is future state transition plan and gap analysis sorts of reports. And there's substantial value in that. The challenge is that it takes 6 months, it takes $250,000, and it tends to become shelfware because it takes so long to happen and it's such a long cycle. But in many cases, people do act on it, but then you have to do a refresh, maybe a year or two later, to take care of changes in the environment and changes that have been made in the organization. The standard of practice was an attempt to create something that's neither a standard nor a practice. It is an approach, and the approach allows you to with people that know how they're doing, know what they're doing, allows you to go over the set of things you would normally cover in such an assessment, but do it quickly and efficiently. So typically, you can do an assessment with the standard of practice and get results back in 10 days, so it's about a tenth as long as what it takes to do one of these large-scale studies. It costs about a tenth as much. And you get the results quickly, so you can start to act on them, and you have more of the available budget to do that. Having said that, it's a process that's not designed to find gaps or assess blame, and it doesn't do the transition planning, the sorts of things that you need to do in great detail to move a large organization forward. But the idea here is that smaller organizations can spend less, get it faster, and get something more useful out of it. And we're hoping eventually that we'll be able to, once we do, say, 50 water systems, that we'll have all of the decision-making surrounding water systems done. And so, there'll only be 20 or 30 possibilities. You'll just pick which possibility you are, and it'll already tell you the set of things you should be doing to be reasonable and prudent in your protection practices. So the standard of practice, as we mentioned, is open source. And Chris, if you could take the mouse and use a right click on ICS security and open it in a new window. We can show you how this works. If you go to all.net and click on protection, this is what you get. And this is a clickable diagram. You can click on anything in the picture and it'll show up with additional detail down below. But if you right click under, there you go, right click so you can open it in a new window. There we go. I guess the internet's slow today. That's like a weather report, right?
Well, it's basically a set of tubes, right?
Yeah, well, that's all right. If we would share the information that it's slow, then maybe we would know not to use it for these sorts of demos. But exciting. So what the standard of practice consists of is about, this is for industrial control systems, the variation for that particular area. It has somewhere over 100 different areas that it covers. Hey, Chris, if you want to toss it over to my desktop, I could probably do it more quickly than what's happening here.
Yeah, let me do that, and I'll work on the background on my faulty machine here.
I've recently upped my internet bandwidth. Oh, there, see, it shows up. All you have to do is threaten it. So in any case, you can see that there are a wide variety of questions here. They cover overarching issues. They scroll into, business modeling, and oh, okay. I think I'm.
You have the con.
Oh, good. It's much easier. This is what the standard of practice for industrial control systems. Let me just back up so you can see how it got here. You go to all.net. You click on protection. So right here on the menu, protection. And you get the clickable diagram. You can click on anything and it will show up on the bottom. And this is the overarching structure of information protection that we use to model things. Click on industrial control system security and that'll come down here. And you'll see all these various issues that we cover. And if you click on any given issue, I'm just going to open it in a new tab so that you can see it without the header. We talk about what promises the business makes, for example, and how you fulfill them, the maturity level of the business, according to the capability maturity model, and so forth. So these are background in terms of your organization, its limits, how it works, and so forth. Location issues. Sometimes you have habitable versus non-habitable areas for industrial control systems, and the workers may be located next to or not next to it, and the risk level associated with it may be high, low, or medium. And so typically what happens is we have a question, an issue that we want to make a decision about, a set of options, and then a decision that says, in this case, for example, if it's a non-habitable area and the risk is medium, then The ICS facility is not secured. Workers are a distant facility, and the infrastructure in between may be insecure. Or if it's habitable, you can have the co-location of the workers at secured facilities, and the non-critical ICS workers can be accessing things remotely. And so these decision processes then have a basis, the reason that the decision is the way it is. So you go through this process and identify what your situation is. And by knowing your situation, knowing how you do risk management, how you do management, elements of the controls that you have in place, the technical securities, how you do zoning, for example, what are your rules surrounding SCADA in terms of how it gets attached to other things in the environment and so forth. By understanding these issues, you can then understand what's useful to share, understand when you get something shared to you, what you can possibly do with it, and in the process, gain a sense of decision making. So, for the most part, if you get an alert from anybody that says part X on thing Y can be broken into by this path and produce this consequence, then it's not something you just rush to act on. You have to have the information in place and available to understand the implications and how you might act on it, who might act on it, who's responsible, and so forth. And so you really need to pre-make these decisions at a strategic level. If you don't pre-make the decisions at a strategic level about what you're going to do, you end up in these emergency situations where you're perhaps making decisions that are not very good decisions. You might immediately try to fix something because you don't know that something else critical depends on it. You go to fix it, you take it offline, and something else bad happens. You might try to do a patch in something that really can't be patched. And there are alternatives. You don't have to patch it. Instead, you could put something in front of it or sort of restrict the ability of the system to do things that are particularly harmful for a period of time until you can get the patch in place. Or it might be something that's just not critical. It might be it's an ancillary system. The risk isn't very high from anything that could happen to it. So if somebody gets to it, rather than try to disrupt your normal operation, you want to wait. So you want to make these decisions in advance. And what the standard of practice does is provide you with that set of decisions and architectural choices that allow you to be prepared and then be able to decide what you're willing to share and under what basis, who has control of it, and what you can do with information that gets shared with you. So that's basically what it's all about. And I'm going to throw it back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Fred. And this is, the identity portion of situational awareness, as you know, I think is one of the least served aspects of all of this. We're all technical people, and we love to look at the technical aspects of all this. But where an organization doesn't know these basic things, where, for example, you don't know what you're trying to achieve during a webinar when your technical things start to go south, like your computer acting up, a current situation as a good example, you don't know what to do. And we see this over and over in the industry where, we get attracted by something like a vulnerability in a device. We think, oh gosh, we need to fix that. Or we have a CEO who reads an article on any virus, and next thing you know, we're working on any virus. It's critical that we get to the state, given the number of facilities we have to deal with here. There are 6,000 electric utilities, 50 to 100,000 water utilities in the U.S. alone, and 2 million agricultural facilities, $2 trillion in manufacturing. We're at the stage right now where most enterprises of all sorts, not just your critical infrastructure, are still making security decisions based on the latest shining object. So I love this standard of practice. As Bear is saying, the ICS ISAC is sort of a Switzerland organization. We're an industry nonprofit. We don't pick winners and losers. There are other ways perhaps to do this. But I think that the standard of practice that you and your team put together, and the Burton Group and Gardner Group used and so forth, is a particularly good way of looking at this. So, Debbie, if you will introduce Graham for his initial comments. Graham has been working with Sophia, and I think has interesting comments on the capabilities for establishing inventory and activity, and look forward to those comments.
As Principal Systems Architect for Yokogawa, Graham Speake is a highly skilled systems security professional with a wealth of experience on both process control system security and IT security from the vendors as well as the asset owner's perspectives. Prior to joining Yokogawa, Graham spent 10 years at BP, where he was employed primarily as a security risk manager, and for 15 years at Atos Origin in various IT and security roles. His ICS career started with designing software for emergency shutdown and fire and gas detection systems. Chris, back to you.
Graham, if you would like to give us your comments for a few minutes, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris, and thanks, Fred. It's yes, like Chris, it's what you've been doing, Fred. Is I've been looking at over a period, and it is very good and yeah, open to everybody, which is great. Okay, so as Debbie said, although I work for Yokogawa, today I'm talking about another product that we've been looking at called Sophia. Now, Sophia, if anybody has been on the INL training up in Idaho Falls, you may have seen Sophia over the past few years. Basically, it is a tool that INL developed, which you put into your network, and it monitors and records all of the traffic going from any of the nodes. So if you put it on one of your spam ports or put a tap into your network, Sophia grabs all the communications, and then you as an operator can decide what it is. So it will look at a traffic between A and B, and you can then say, yeah, that is a valid traffic, or it's invalid, or you just don't know. And once you've mapped out all your traffic, so say in the diagram that Chris has got up, Sophia would look at all the traffic between all those points. So if you normally get traffic from the HMI to the PLC, you would mark that one as valid, whitelisted traffic, assuming it's the same protocol, and you would never see it again. You could see it on an overview graphic, and that's it. If you suddenly got something from, say a SCADA server or the SARA server coming into that PLC, you would then alert that one and alert the operator that there's an unknown piece of traffic coming. So you can effectively map out your network and map out what is valid and what is invalid in your network. And as we know with industrial control systems, these things don't change from year after year. So once you've gone through a process of finding out what all your traffic is, what is valid, what's invalid, it doesn't change. So you can let the operator sit this, and in theory, Sophia shouldn't see anything new, and if it does, bang, you'll get the alert up, and he will see instantly and decide what to do. Sophia comes in a number of different options. You can have a box as just a collector, which just collects all this data, and then another one which is an aggregator and display terminal. So the aggregator will obviously take data from lots of different Sophia collectors in the field, put them all together, and then it displays them in a 3D visualization. So you can zoom around, you can put the IPs on a map, a world map, so you can see it's coming from China or Russia or the United States. And they might be valid. It might be you're having remote access from some of your remote stations. Perhaps you have a third-party vendor looking after your network. So you can see all this happening, or you can just see it in your where your data is. You can group subnets together, so you can have lots of different subnets. So you may have your DMZ and put that one so you can see traffic coming from a group of one or more subnets. That's your DMZ, then perhaps going down to your PLC equipment, perhaps your HMI subnet. So you can move all of this around the screen. When I used to be at BP, one of the things I did when I went to a site was say, well, what have you got? What is your equipment? And the majority of people couldn't give me a full 100% accurate listing of what they had. They might know, oh, we've got these PLCs, we've got a few of these HMIs, but trying to work out what they have and what talks to what was very, very difficult. And I was quite often putting in or upgrading the firewalls between segmenting their PLC, their process control network from the business network. I obviously needed to know what traffic was going back and forth, and it was very difficult because they didn't know, or they knew this type of traffic went, which they thought it was, you know, for one application, but they couldn't tell me all the ports, or if there was another port coming up, they went, well, don't block it because it might be necessary. So it always took a long time, and there was never a real easy way where we could work out what that traffic was. And particularly a lot of these sites, they did things perhaps at the end of a day or at the end of a week or end of a month, perhaps uploading data to a different system that was just aggregated over a period of time. So we had to be very careful when we put these firewalls in and make sure the rule sets were open enough that we could catch all these things and then close them down over time. So looking at that, you know, something having a device such as Sophia, to me would be really useful, where we could look at a system that was already in place, or ideally, and where I'm coming from Yokogawa, if we could do this when we do the factory acceptance test and then the systems acceptance test and then move it on site, we could give to the end user, this is what all the communication is. So as we move through the different processes and when we actually get to the final site, if something then doesn't work, we can then start looking at this and saying, well, hang on, this is what we had before and this is what the communication paths were. It's now different. So we can now work out what we have. I know with Sophia they're looking at perhaps adding in extra things so you can have extra inventory. And again, that is one of the things a big end user needs, is an accurate inventory of everything they have, both the communications and the actual devices they have, because nobody ever keeps a good listing once these systems have been deployed. And you know, once they've been around 20 years, 25 years, you certainly haven't got the people who put them in years ago, so it's very difficult to work out what we have. And even as a manufacturer, for us, we quite often go to a customer and say, you've got one of these systems, do you want to upgrade it? And they, quite often, they don't even know where it is, and they don't even know what version they have, so they have to take our word that this is the license they're using, and yes, it's out now, going out of date, we need to update it or put a patch in. So the more things we can have, like Sophia, we need in this space. We've got to have ways that we can find out what equipment is running, what protocols are running, so we can start sharing that. And as a vendor, I can then share that data with an end user, tell him to look at certain things. If I know there's perhaps there's something going wrong, or there's a patch that needs to apply, he can look at that one and make sure it's going correctly. And when we do an upgrade as a vendor, I can then show to the end user, this is what the communications were before. I've now done the upgrade. Look, the communications are still going through. They're still doing what you think it's supposed to do. So it's just another, for me, it's just another tool we can use to improve the communications and the knowledge sharing we have between a vendor and an end user, and also a vendor could use internally to find out more of what he's using on his network and how it can be used. I think that's a quick overview. I do know that Sophia is in a beta mode at the moment. If people are interested, they can go to the Next Defense website, which is nextdefense.com, or you can drop me an email or Chris, and they'll put you in touch with me, and I can show you the relevant site where you can go to sign up. And I believe the commercial version is due out sometime Q2, Q3 of this year. And with that, back to you, Chris.
Fantastic, Graham. And just so everybody knows, that's Next Defense without a T, so nexdefense.com.
Yep.
And you know, so much of that perspective you bring to this, Graham, is just epic for this conversation. You've been the asset owner, you are the vendor, you've been working with Sophia, you know, one of the technology providers out there with the solution. And everything you said speaks so much to the point here. what we're here today to talk about is how you do this, establishing situational awareness. And both you and Fred have provided examples that are out there right now and available. And they both speak to exactly the point as I was making earlier, that we've made an awful lot of progress. And it may break a lot of hearts out there, in the research community and other places, but Yokogawa is never going to make an absolutely perfectly secure device. Nobody on the planet ever has. So, yes, it's wonderful that we chase after those. We need to, I know in the ITS manufacturer space, a lot of progress has been made on making a lot more secure devices. But that way doesn't lead to final security. Your experiences as an asset owner, we look at this span of time. When you were doing that, I had started Lofty Perks and I was looking at exactly the issue. And, the question to me was, why can't we see these networks? At that same time, you're out there dealing with oil platforms and so forth, chasing down these exact issues. And, but we're at this stage. We've got vendors like Yokogawa who have people like yourself who are very aware of this and working on the solutions, not just, since Tuesday, but the last number of years. I've been excited about SOFIA since I first heard about it in Idaho National Lab. It's fantastic to see it coming out on the market. The Internet lab is on the beta list, and we'll be putting it in the SARA project shortly, and that'll be fantastic. And the SARA server itself includes a open source tool called Visdom, which is V-I-S-D-O-M. Oh, V-I-Z, one of the other. I got like Graham. Anybody has any questions about that, and you can't find it at southforksecurity.com. Has the open source tool there to provide similar capabilities. I came out of the sim world. Yes.
I just wanted to point out that SOFIA is a great example of this for network traffic, but there are also whitelisting tools and other tools that reside inside various of these components. They can't work in all of them. PLCs, for example, don't necessarily have the same infrastructure underlying them. But these other change detection tools are also very effective at detecting changes internal to a system, so that when you combine together the current capabilities for internal change detection and external change detection, and when the vendors embrace the idea of pre-mapping what's supposed to happen internally and externally, and then mapping that across legitimate changes, that workflow that gets built into that updates the inventory and allows you to have a much better clarity around what's supposed to happen, has a very, very strong effect on ensuring the integrity of the infrastructure.
Absolutely, and that's the reason we have we should have optimism about this. As you say, the infrastructure supports this capability already. We're not talking about ripping out and replacing. Bolting on things like SOFIA, that augment the capabilities you have, and then using those capabilities on the existing equipment. Things like the switches and the HMIs and SCADA servers and various components allows you to do exactly what Graham was saying. See what you have, validate it there. So Graham, you had touched on a point that I find very exciting. So if you wouldn't mind just going on about that a minute, if I understand this correctly, so Yokogawa is looking at this type of approach, and SOFIA particularly as a tool, to actually build out systems that have localized situational awareness from the get-go. So where are you in that thought process, and how do you see this over the next several years changing the way Yokogawa does new installations with clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've been looking at for quite a few years, and I know we or one of our people actually developed something similar for a PhD, where basically it was to map out some networks. So and that must have been 4 or 5 years ago. So it's something we've been looking at, and it's trying to work out what should we put in, because we're seeing that we need to give the end user more and more information. Certainly when I was an end user, I always wanted it, but the vendor could never give it to us because it was too difficult. So it's something we're looking at and say, well, what can we do? What does the end user want, or what does he need? And he might not even want it at the moment, but he will in a few years' time, so that we can produce this now while we're going through. So, and it was for us, it was looking at, well, what is on the market, what can we do, what is commercially available. You've talked about Wisdom, which is the open source. There are other things around that we could do, and it was thinking what is the best tool that we can have so that we can grab all this information. Like Fred said, there are then other things with whitelisting we can do actually on some of the devices. What can we do as a total security solution that, yeah, it's never going to be perfect, but what can we offer then that the end user to say, look, as we go through our systems now, we're certainly right from when we start building these out in our factory, we're putting antivirus on, we're putting whitelisting on, we're starting to build all those out. Even if the end user then takes them off, we want to prove to him that we've done everything in our power, that we're going to give him a system that is fully mapped out, is virus-free as far as we can determine, and make sure that we're giving them the best system. Whether they buy the antivirus, whether they buy whitelisting, or whether they just take it off, that's up to the end user, but we want to give them all that option along with all the network map and say, if you do it this way and leave everything in, you're going to have a fairly secure system, and then at least that gives him the chance to look at that system and decide what he wants to do. A lot of the larger companies are certainly wanting this kind of thing built in because they want to be able to, particularly when it goes offshore or in hospitable places, they want to make sure it's as secure as they can right from the start. And trying to backfit all, antivirus is not too bad. You start doing whitelisting on a device, it's not easy to do as a retrofit. It does take a lot of work. So we want to build that in, then give them the option to say, look, there we go, we put McAfee on, say, you can go to McAfee and buy it from us, whatever. This is giving you a very secure, well-built, well-documented system that you can move forward with.
Yeah, and it's inside of those statements, you see the motivations and the capabilities. The motivations of Yokogawa and your peers in the manufacturing space are very clear. A lot of progress has been made, and thank you for that view into the mind of manufacturers. Again, this is a reason for people to have hope. There are paths through this, and the capabilities. A lot of what you have said and what Fred has said speak to not the technology but the process, and the process inside a vendor, and the process inside an analyst, and the processes inside industrial facilities are the big asset in that. Situational awareness is what a control system is. Do I know what the flows are? Do I know what the temperature is? The cultures in the industrial space are much more geared to establishing and maintaining situational awareness than they are in IT, where just keeping track of what you have is chaos at the best of times. So Fred or Graham, I think Graham, this might be for you as well. Your interactions with customer sites, and particularly as it has evolved over the last couple of years. Do you see this understanding of the need for and the capability to establish situational awareness catching hold among the asset owner space?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think 3-4 years ago it was very low, but I think with everything that's happened, particularly with some of the big, people like Saudi Aramco and others, they were proving that big networks can be hit hard. People now are wanting more and more information. They want to find out, well, what have we got there? What are the patches? What else do we need to do? And you say the awareness is needed by everybody, and everybody is starting to want it, but there's not many places they can get it. And so it's trying to work out, well, what are all these different organizations? Where's all the data held? Where's the knowledge? And how can they aggregate it? Because if it's too fragmented, they won't use it because it will take too much of their time. Perhaps some of the very large companies could have whole departments, but the medium-sized companies, it's a nightmare. And where do they go to? Half of them don't know ICS cert or any of the where a lot of the vulnerabilities are coming. So you need to try to educate them. And offer them ways that they can get this information and disseminate down to them in a way that is meaningful to them, rather than just a whole list of vulnerabilities where they don't even know half the time what these components are or whether they've even got them in their organization. So it is improving, but it's definitely at the larger company at the moment when we've got to try to think, and things that you're doing is going to make it easier for the medium to small company to get that information.
So Graham, I strongly agree with you, and I want to identify something that I think is very important here, and that is that unlike many of the ISACs, the ICS ISAC is focused on helping the vendors bring this capability to the end users.
Yep.
And I think that's the key. There are sort of a couple of keys to getting this done. One of them is that the vendors bring it to the small and medium-sized facilities. And another one is that the cost of doing this drops down significantly and the complexity drops down significantly. And so I think, you know, that's sort of fundamental, and that's a big difference between what the ICS ISAC has been doing and what everybody else has been doing.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it's trying to, you know, I will quite often talk to the medium-sized companies and try to explain what we can do for them, just so they've got the awareness, and even if they don't accept it straight away, you know, if you keep going back, it's growing that knowledge, and then they'll suddenly look and, okay, well, what can we do now? And yeah, and it's trying to bring that a good set of knowledge at a cost that they know is beneficial to them, or they can go to their higher C-levels and go, look, it's only costing this much, we think it's worth it, and then people are going to buy in a lot quicker.
Yeah, so part of that drop of the cost and reduction of the effort has to do with getting volume, right? So,
yep.
So after you go, like I talked about before, after you do, there are what, 10,000 water systems in the U.S. or something?
Something like that, yeah, if not more.
Right. Well, but so for 10,000 water systems, you really can't do custom 10,000 times for any reasonable amount of money, and you're not going to do it in the next couple of years, and it doesn't matter how big a company you are.
Yep, so, exactly.
So what has to happen ultimately is that we get some number of these water companies that are characteristic of different sizes and shapes done, and we come up with a common understanding so that they already know what they have. When a vendor goes in, they say, look, there are 3 different kinds of situations for your environment. You know, answer these 2 questions. Okay, this is the situation you're in. 90%, 98% right. Might not be perfect, but it's real good. You then have a standard set of decisions about what to do and how to do it. You have a standard set of tools that allow you to automate as much of that as possible, so that, you know, the person who's working, by the way, as the information protection person in these companies, for a very large percentage of them, and this is borne out by statistics, is somebody who was at one point in their life in jail, who is half-time doing information technology and half-time digging the ditches to put things in. And they don't have the knowledge, time, experience, expertise, or money to change anything or to understand what's going on. And this is an ideal situation for a vendor to have a relatively low-cost, standardized solution that's not perfect but pretty darn good, and to implement it on a wide scale, and then use the situation awareness and the ability to modify the operation slightly for emergency situations, so that when something happens on a large scale or happens somewhere else that might affect them, they can, you know, be ahead of the curve instead of waiting for something bad to happen. It drops the price, it makes it efficient, it makes it quick, it makes it easier to use for everybody, and it presents them with a solution instead of a whole bunch of new problems.
Yep. And you know, these, you know, amidst all the optimism, you know, the issues, you know, these last couple of conversations that Graham, you and I were down in Orlando last week at the SANS ITS conference, and you were on a panel talking about the GISBP certification,
Yep.
which I think is, you know, and for the record, you know, the listening, I'm sold. I think it's exactly right. I think Graham and the other folks, Tyler Williams and so forth, who were involved in putting that together, did a great job. And it's, you know, yet another step in that direction. But it's these opportunities we have to create the case set, create the use cases. And this is so much of what, you know, we're about. as an organization, trying to find the organizations and expertise like YouTube, and like a lot of the people I see out in the attendance today, and a lot of folks I know will be listening to this in the future, get involved. It doesn't take much, where we can take a single example like what Fred was talking about, where YouTube can work together perhaps to create a case that works for the parties involved. We have the drivers behind this now. Many of us have been involved with the cybersecurity framework development through the Department of Commerce under the executive order in this last year. We may have a lot of complex opinions on that, but we see, one of the things I'm thinking as we're talking about this, you see the comments coming from like the major asset owners on a panel I think you were on, Graham, that their insurance companies are now starting to talk to them about whether or not they're following the best practices. And those opportunities to create individual examples that can propagate rapidly. We need to avoid, while we certainly can, we're on the path to fix all these things, we do face brittle failure moments. And how do we avoid those? That's the key question. So, Graham, Fred raised the small medium question, and this is something that as an organization with the scale of Yokogawa, you've got I can't imagine how many customers out there. Can you share some of your thoughts on the small to medium space and communications that are happening or not happening with them, and how you feel you can work to help the smaller organizations that are the bulk of the problem out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think like with everybody, large organizations easy. With we work with some of our in the US people like Chevron. They're a major customer for us. It's easy to work with those, and you can even as a vendor, we can justify our time working with those because it's a large part of our revenue. It's always harder when you go to the medium and small, but it's certainly I try to do every month. I circulate around Yokogawa a security newsletter. It's just little things of perhaps this month's patches, but also looking at talking about patching, talking about whitelisting, and that goes out to a lot of our salespeople, so they can see. Get a bit more information themselves because perhaps those aren't security trained, but then they can pass that information on to the small and medium customers that they can come into. So it's a way of that we're pushing data down, information from myself on the security field down to those smaller customers. That as we get to smaller customers, it's harder and harder for someone like myself or other people to go around and talk to all of them. But that's one way. We also do a user group, and certainly in our user group coming up in September, we're having I'm doing a 2 or 3 hour introduction to security. So it's just a very high level. This is what security means. This is why you should have it, and talking about antivirus and whitelisting, and just showing people the various techniques and applications that are out there, and not trying to sell them anything, just to try to give them that background information that they can go, okay, yeah, then now talk to us about that, we're interested. But it's trying to get that information to the small and medium. We've got to, as a vendor, we're trying to push that down through, give our salespeople and our people on the ground at least the basic information that they can pass down, even if they're not expert in it. It's the only way that we can do that, get that information to those people in an easy way. Anything else is just too labor intensive, and we can't get all our security people going there. So yeah, that's the way we're trying to do it at the moment, and hopefully that will start reaping benefits. But it's a long-term process. It's not something we know we're not going to sell in 3 or 6 months to all these companies. It's just getting that information to them and getting their knowledge and awareness up, so that they will eventually come back to us and say, okay, I want to talk to somebody about that now.
Well, and that speaks to both the capabilities, and people might understand the hurdles large organizations have. as you say, this is very large organizations like the U.S. government, like the big manufacturers like such as yours. Yes, there's great reach, but there's also a lot of momentum. There's a lot of inertia to be overcome, and it's the work of individuals like yourself, as you described, that can provide seeds, but it has to come from all sides. And Prudence Parks, as the Utility Telecom Commissioner, is in the attendance right now. She's part of our question, and before I frame that one, I'd say that this is one of these issues where organizations like the UTC, like the ISAC, like ANISA in Europe, like a lot of the people who are on this call now, and the usual cast of characters will come to look in the future, taking this information, these capabilities, these ideas, and putting in the hands of one by one smaller organizations through mechanisms they get, perhaps through organizations like UTC or the ISAC or whatnot. That provides the background radiation, if you will, to enable the vendors like Yokogawa to see the upswell of demand. And that's how we all, as individuals and smaller organizations, can help these large organizations get things done. So Prudence's question speaks to the strengths and weaknesses of diversity, basically, and I'll read it and perhaps a little bit of a paraphrase here, but when do the benefits of the commons become the enemy of the good? Doesn't the diversity of the ecosystem actually provide some protection, albeit slim, because it takes the perpetrators so much time to figure out the system configuration and vulnerability? And we've just got a few minutes left, so I'll try to make a short comment on that myself and let you guys chime in. But I think the security through obscurity is wearing off. And as automated systems, one of the partners in the PACS initiative, for example, is John Matherly, and who wrote the Shodan tool. And this is a database of exposed infrastructure systems. We can only imagine, and it would only be dozent to assume that the attackers, that are the adversaries, have done at least that much. So I think the security through obscurity actually has been an advantage for us. I think it's the only thing, frankly, that kept the hackers from focusing on infrastructure when I started working about 20 years ago, because everything was rich and meaty and consistent in IT, in finance, and in retail and other places. But I think that that period is rapidly coming to an end, where you're not small enough and obscure enough not to be a target, someone with the resources and time and the automated tools to figure it out. So,
Chris?
Yes.
I'm going to take a different position from you on this one.
Please.
I think that as a fundamental, the question is not whether this common mode failure that's going to persist if we get to uniform. I don't think the question is whether that's going to be severe. I think the question is, right now we have a common mode failure called everything. So since, for the most part, there's almost no security in any of this stuff, if we get something common, inexpensive, easy to do, and that's adoptable by everybody, that'll improve the situation. It won't make it perfect, but it's surely a lot better than nobody has anything. And the sad reality, or maybe it's not a sad reality, is that, if everything is one-off, you're never going to address the 100,000 water systems and the millions of manufacturing systems. So you have to do, some trade-off between quantity and quality. So I think, what you want to do here is get 90% of everybody up to 90% effective instead of 100% of everybody at 0% effective. And once you get to 90% or 90% effective, then you have to address those issues. But I also want to say that security through obscurity is sort of a misnomer. For the most part, you certainly don't want the security because we don't have anything there, but we haven't mentioned it to you, that kind of obscurity. And you would prefer not to have security by obscurity in the form of the back door is unlocked, but we have a big dog at the front. So you might think that you couldn't come in the back. That's not very good either. But there's a lot of obscurity that has to do with how I've configured this, or what time of day this happens, or which equipment I've put in what place, and this sort of stuff, which actually is beneficial. It's called, counterintelligence. So I think you need an effective counterintelligence program, because at the end of the day, if I can get good enough intelligence in what you have there, I will find some way around it, because you're not going to have perfect security. It's too expensive, and even if you could afford it, there are better ways to spend the money. So I just think that there's a trade-off here, and the trade-off favors more protection than we have now.
Yeah, very well. The 2 points, if you couldn't agree with more. Obscuring who you are and what you have, absolutely. But you're absolutely right. When we look at the scaling issue, where everything is different, we stand no chance of addressing a significant portion of it. So we're at the top of our hour, Graham, but you want the last word on that topic. There's diversity and commons. Where do you fall on which one's better?
It's a hard one, yeah. I don't think obscurity works that much. But yeah, like Fred said, I think we as a vendor, I need to be a lot more open. I need to give at least my end users a complete view of what we're putting in and tell them what we're putting in, rather than trying to obscure it by saying, oh, that's proprietary protocol, or we're not going to tell you about that. We need to give that information out and be a lot better in sharing this information. And yeah, that information is going to get out to other people, but I think we just have to bite that bullet and decide, yes, that's what we're going to do, because I think overall it's going to be for the good of the industry if we all know what's going on.
Yep, and that's a good point to end it. And I can give a plug to Adam Crane with the work he's doing with the BMP3 group along those lines. The understanding of what's going on with inside the protocols is critical, and everybody needs to work with that. Adam's doing some work with Palo Alto in the SARA project that we're going to be having further conversations about. So I want to thank everyone for showing up. Certainly thank our panelists, all our membership for giving us the support we need to actually exist and be here. Let folks know that you can join. We're happy to have membership. We've got another panel coming up about this time next month, talking about sharing information between knowledge centers at the chair of perf.org and Johan Ramby from ANISA in the EU. And we've got our conference coming up September 17th in Atlanta, Georgia at Georgia Tech, and hope to see many of you there. So with that, Debbie, if you want to dance us out of here, the floor is yours.
To our distinguished panelists, thank you so much for your thoughts and insights you've shared on today's call. And to our audience, on behalf of all of us at the ICS-ISAC, we appreciate your joining us today. We hope that you found the information of value and something that you can take to further enhance your organization's cybersecurity posture. Our next public briefing will be held Wednesday, April 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and feature a panel of distinguished subject matter experts presenting SARA from the Neck Up, Connecting Knowledge Centers. Other sessions will be announced on our monthly updates, on the center's website, and in our other communication vehicles. As a reminder, a recording of this session will be available on the ICS-ISAC Briefing Archive page. Thank you all again for your participation on today's call.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.